Hello, and welcome to the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association first ever virtual Global Plasma Summit. I'm Amy Ifantis, President and CEO of PPTA. In March, at the onset of the pandemic, I read this quote in a news story. "Today, the coronavirus has thrown us all in the mud," wrote Admiral William McRaven of the LBJ School at the University of Texas, comparing the pandemic to training with Navy SEALs. He added, "We are cold, wet, and miserable, and the dawn seems a long way off. But while we should not be cavalier about the dangers of the pandemic, neither should we feel hopeless and paralyzed with fear. Hope abounds." What a wonderful theme for us this week. While we are not able to be together in person, we will not be deterred. Here we are together in another way. Together in a way that maybe allows us to listen more carefully, to secure amazing speakers we wouldn't otherwise get if they had to travel great distances instead of joining us from the comfort of their dining room, to include meeting participants who can't ordinarily make the journey for these meetings. And most of all, to fight against those forces that try to disengage us from one another, like a pandemic, and to spite those forces by finding new ways to join together from across the world. We are meeting at a crossroads. Patients around the world rely on medicines from human plasma to treat rare and chronic diseases. For many, these are the only therapies available to treat their illness. And while we celebrate the fact that a halo effect of the pandemic means people now recognize the value and need for plasma, they may not yet understand that the need will exist long after the pandemic is behind us. For patients with rare diseases like primary immune deficiency, hemophilia and other bleeding disorders, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and chronic idiopathic demyelinating polyneuropathy, hereditary angioedema, myasthenia gravis, and others, these terms are not just polysyllabic, foreign terms, and they're not even challenging compared to the ravages they manifest in the absence of treatment. Apart from the obvious devastations of COVID-19, the pandemic has also worked to frustrate plasma collections. We know that patients encountered challenges to access even in years of record plasma collections, especially for immune globulins. Recognizing that the world's biggest collectors have publicly reported drops in collections this year as a consequence of the pandemic, and understanding that the therapies created by the precious resource we call plasma can take 7 to 12 months to manufacture, we share a collective concern that patient clinical need may not be met in the coming months. For that reason, we have developed a call to action, and we need your help. First, we ask that you reach out to policymakers at every level to alert them to the immediate need for plasma collection. Second, urge them to roll back outdated regulations that inhibit collection. For example, in Europe, obsolete arguments about allowing the recognition of donor contribution and the coexistence of both private and public collections mean that only 4 European countries are collecting enough plasma to meet their own patients' clinical need. And in the US, the bulk of plasma is collected in states concentrated in the Sun and Rust Belts, while California and New York have few centers. We cannot and should not continue to allow a few to bear the burden of the many. Next, if you're a healthy, qualified adult, please donate plasma. Your gift is one of life for a patient with rare disease. And finally, and this is something everyone can do, please share the message with others. Use your voice, your social media channels, your faith communities, your book clubs, your sports clubs, community groups, and neighborhood associations to share this message with others. Together we are stronger, and patients are counting on us. This promises to be an enlightening and inspiring week. Hope abounds. We will hear from patients, providers, researchers, policymakers, and thought leaders. Our headliners include Stella Kyriakides, Health Commissioner for the European Commission, who is charged with leading a task force to coordinate the EU's response to the pandemic, and who has spoken publicly about the need for plasma collection. We will also hear from Admiral Brett Giroir, the Assistant Secretary for Health, or the ASH, at the Department of Health and Human Services. The ASH is a leader in the U.S. response to the pandemic. As a pediatric critical care physician, Admiral Giroir has a unique understanding of the role of plasma therapies in treating not just COVID patients, but also those rare disease patients who rely on these life-saving therapies every day of their lives. And as always, we will recognize the recipients of the Otto Schwartz and Hilfenhaus Awards, each of which celebrates individuals whose contributions to the universe of plasma therapies merit respect and celebration. But first, to kick off our summit, we'll hear from patients. A chief goal of patient advocacy organizations is to address the unmet need of patients with rare diseases by providing access to the most effective therapies. The influence of patient advocacy groups has grown, and the groups representing diseases served by plasma therapies are well established and sophisticated. These groups collect data, engage in the drug development continuum, and some directly fund, help to design or recruit patients to participate in clinical trials. Their voice is increasingly integrated into the science of therapies, and no discussion on medicine should ever occur without them. PPTA is pleased to provide a patient-driven discussion to shine a spotlight on those issues of greatest concern to the community whose needs are at the center of our mission. In addition to the rich content that you will enjoy through vivid transmission, you'll also have an opportunity to network with one another through our Gatherly feature, whose unique platform provides an intuitive way to navigate through public spaces, to join in a group discussion, or to conduct private conversations. I'd like to thank the sponsors of both sessions and exhibits. Without them, this event would not be possible. It's their commitment and confidence that means we can defy a pandemic and come together this week. You can also interact with our sponsors on the Gatherly platform. You'll find ample opportunity to do so during networking breaks, just as you would in the exhibition hall of an in-person meeting. So please stop by. I wish to thank our global board of directors and all of you who contribute to providing guidance to PPTA. I'd like to thank all of those individuals who work tirelessly to make this event possible, including our dynamic presenters and PPTA's own dedicated staff. The Global Plasma Summit is novel, and to call on an exhausted term, unprecedented. When we were in the early stages of planning this meeting, I got some good advice from a patient group leader whose organization had recently successfully executed their own virtual meeting. She warned me that we would likely face huge challenges and probably some tears. And she was correct. We have. But here we are, across oceans, time zones, languages, and borders, joined with a shared mission of improving the lives of patients. Remember, hope abounds. I wish you a productive and inspiring Global Plasma Summit. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to our Global Board Chair, Dr. Karen Etchberger. Karen?
Thanks, Amy. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to virtually be here. I hope wherever you are joining us from that you and your loved ones are staying healthy and sane. I'm really glad all of us could gather together as an industry before the end of the year, even if in doing so we must remain apart. Whether you have been forced to work remotely because of stay-at-home orders in your country, or have been needed on the front line during the pandemic because of your essential role, There's not one aspect of our lives, personally or professionally, that hasn't been disrupted in 2020. It's truly been an unprecedented year in every sense, and our industry has certainly had its fair share of disruption because of COVID-19. Before I give a quick update on some of the key points and priorities of the PPTA's Board of Directors that has been focusing on, including our industry's response to COVID, I wanted to share a little bit about my background for those of you who may not know me. I work for CSL Behring, the world's third largest biotech company, where I have held a number of different roles in more than 2 decades that I've been part of the organization. CSL has more than 270 plasma collection centers globally in North America, Europe, and China, and our medicines help patients with rare and serious diseases in more than 75 countries. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years, and I've been involved in PPTA for a number of those years. And I've had the pleasure to work with many of you that are joining us today. As some of you may know, earlier this year, I was appointed the chair of the Board of Directors for a 3-year term. That seemed like it would be pretty straightforward at the time. Little did I know, or did any of us know, what our industry was in store for this year. Throughout my career, I've been asked what's kept me working in biotech for nearly 3 decades. Hands down, it's knowing that every day in our industry, we have the opportunity to help transform patients' lives through our transformational medicines. And during the pandemic over the past several months has certainly solidified for me why the work our industry does for patients is so important, and I'm sure it's done the same for all of you. As an industry, we've needed to be agile and to adapt to the evolving environment that is COVID-19. For plasma collection centers, that has meant ensuring we keep our employees and donors safe through social distancing requirements, controlling the number of donors on site at one time, and ensuring everyone is wearing the proper PPE. In addition, we must continue to communicate the fact that we are an essential business, and it is essential that plasma donors continue to come to our centers, as Amy was mentioning. There's no doubt that the pandemic has shined a bright light on how plasma donation contributes to scientific innovation and has the potential to save lives. As we know, a lot of these conversations have been related to the importance of donating convalescent plasma. As Amy pointed out in her opening remarks, all of us must ensure that policymakers and the public understand the critical need for source plasma donations as well. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, it is a moral imperative for our industry to continue to drive scientific innovation and enable access to critical therapies so we can help improve the lives of even more patients and, by extension, their loved ones. PPTA has always promoted collaboration across the industry. I've never been prouder of our industry coming together than this year when several companies, including my own, united to develop a potential hyperimmune globulin to potentially treat patients who have serious complications from COVID-19. And I'm happy to share that just last week, the COVID-19 Plasma Alliance, along with the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health, announced the start of a phase 3 clinical trial to evaluate the safety and efficacy of this investigational hyperimmune globulin medicine. We are hopeful for initial results from this phase 3 trial by the end of this year. The product would be an IV administered therapy comprised of COVID antibodies. And that's really what inspires me about my role as the head of the PPTA board and serves as my guiding star in mapping out our priorities, our ability to make a difference. As we continue to navigate the uncertainty of the COVID-19 landscape, we must also remain focused on our long-term priorities. While the pandemic certainly puts a lot of pressure on our industry, we must remain resilient and resolute in charting our future course. There are 4 key priorities across PPTA from my perspective. Addressing supply challenges. As an association, we must ensure our therapies are readily available to patients. This requires strengthening relationships and having productive conversations with government agencies related to how plasma is collected and transformed into therapies. This is really important when we think about exploring new technologies that can improve our ability to serve patients' needs. In addition, we are working on a robust marketing campaign to raise the awareness of the importance of plasma donation at a time when social distancing and stay-at-home orders have impacted our collection efforts. Next, ensuring patient access. Adverse pricing proposals continue to be especially harmful to the plasma industry, limiting our ability to drive scientific innovation and to ensure adequate supply of therapies. We must continue to have meaningful conversations with policymakers globally to ensure they understand the value of our therapies and the challenges of developing and delivering them to patients. These innovations have the potential to be life-changing, but only if patients have access. Advocating in Europe. We must continue our strong advocacy efforts in Europe as regulators there prepare to undertake a review of the EU Blood Directive. This creates an opportunity for a productive, science-based discussion to ensure an optimal framework for plasma therapies and patient care in the EU. And lastly, working in and with China. Working with stakeholders in China, there is a great opportunity for PPTA to develop a 5-year strategy that charts a clear path forward for improving the environment for plasma collection, regulation, and access in Asia's largest market. This is, of course, not an extensive list of priorities, but it offers a window into what the board remains focused on in addition to leading through the pandemic. While we do face challenges across our industry in the near term, this next decade has the potential to offer incredible opportunities in the long term that will benefit the patients that count on us. And that's really why I think we're all here. Everyone participating in the summit today touches patients' lives, no matter what part of the industry you work in or what area of your company you sit. Whether it's in R&D, commercial, or manufacturing, you're all touching patients. We are really fortunate to have a career with purpose. I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with all of our PPTA members during my term as board chair so we can share perspectives, solve problems, and begin to write our industry's important next chapter together for patients and donors alike. Thank you and enjoy the conference.